I want you to picture something. 17 years. 17 years of arriving early, staying late, skipping vacations, training people half your age who end up becoming your boss. 17 years of building something from nothing. Wire by wire, system by system, line by line. Now, picture walking in one Monday morning and finding a 28-year-old sitting in your chair, using your computer, accessing your files, and smiling at you like you are the visitor. My name is Claire Donovan. I am 52 years old. I spent 17 years as the head of data infrastructure at one of the largest financial firms in Chicago. I built their entire compliance system from scratch, designed every fail-safe, wrote every protocol, trained every analyst who ever sat in that department. And then one Tuesday afternoon in October, a 28-year-old named Brandon Walsh walked through the door, son of the company's second largest shareholder. No technical background, no compliance experience, no idea what a data architecture even was. But he had a title, Vice President of Digital Transformation, and a mandate to modernize the department, starting with me. They called it restructuring. I called it what it was, a purge. But here is what Brandon Walsh did not know. What none of them knew. I had been quietly preparing for this exact moment for 3 years. Because when you have spent 17 years building something, you learn very quickly who actually owns it. And it was not them. Stay with me until the end, because what happened next changed everything for all of us. Welcome to Narrative Vault, where every story has a price. Let me take you back to the beginning. I joined Meridian Financial Group in 2007, fresh out of a decade in federal compliance auditing. The firm was a mess. No unified data system, no compliance framework. 3 separate departments running 3 separate databases that had never once spoken to each other. My first week, I drew a map on a whiteboard of everything that needed to connect. The CEO at the time, Gerald Marsh, looked at it for a long time, then said, "Claire, how long would it take to build this?" I said, 2 years if you give me the resources. He said, "You have 18 months and a team of 4. I built it in 14. By 2010, Meridian had the cleanest compliance record in the Midwest. No SEC flags, no audit failures, no penalties, just clean numbers and a system that hummed like a well-tuned engine. I trained every person who came through that department. Some of them went on to become CFOs at other firms. 3 of them still send me birthday messages every year. Gerald retired in 2019. The new CEO, a man named Philip Crane, came in talking about disruption, innovation, cutting legacy costs. I had heard those words before. They always meant the same thing. Get rid of the people who remember how things actually work. But I smiled, stayed quiet, and kept building. Because I knew something Philip Crane did not. I knew where every single foundation block was buried, and more importantly, I knew whose name was on them. Brandon Walsh arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because I had spent Monday night finalizing a quarterly risk report that had taken 6 weeks to build. He walked in wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. Hair perfectly styled. Cologne you could smell from the elevator. He shook my hand and said, "Claire, I have heard so much about you. This is going to be such an exciting transition." I smiled, said, "Welcome to the department," and went back to my desk. His first week, he called a team meeting, presented a slide deck titled, Meridian 3.0, The Future is Now. 42 slides, full of buzzwords, agile pipelines, cloud-native transformation, AI-powered compliance modules, Not one slide mentioned what we currently had. Not one slide showed any understanding of what our system actually did. When he finished, I raised my hand. I said, "Brandon, slide 31 mentions replacing the vendor verification layer. Can you walk me through what you plan to use as the duplicate payment filter during the transition period?" He blinked, smiled, said, "Great question, Claire. That is exactly the kind of legacy thinking we are here to move beyond." The junior analysts looked at their laptops. I nodded, said, "Of course," and wrote one word in my notebook, "prepared," because that was the moment I knew exactly what kind of war this was, and I had been fighting quiet wars my entire career. Within 3 weeks, Brandon had made changes. Big ones. He archived the vendor cross-reference system I had built after a near miss with a fraudulent contractor in 2015. Said it was redundant overhead. He removed the multi-layer approval chain on payments over $50,000. Said it slowed down operations. He replaced my quarterly risk mapping protocol with an automated dashboard he had purchased from a startup that had been operating for 11 months. 11 months! I documented every change, every deletion, and every override. I sent formal risk flags through the internal compliance channel. Every single one. Brandon replied to the first one with 3 words. "Noted. Moving forward." He did not reply to the others. The CFO called me into his office one afternoon, sat me down, looked at me with the expression people use when they have already made a decision and need you to agree with it. He said, "Claire, Brandon has flagged your flags as obstructionist. We need you to trust the process." I said, "The process removed a filter that caught 2 fraudulent vendor payments last year alone." He said, "We appreciate your historical contributions, but the company needs to evolve." I looked at him for a long moment, then said, "I understand completely." And I did. I understood exactly what was happening and exactly what I needed to do. That evening, I went home as I opened a folder on my personal encrypted drive, a folder I had been quietly building for 2 years. I labeled it simply, Foundation. Here is something they teach you in federal compliance auditing. Document everything. Not because you plan to use it, but because the day you need it. You will be very glad you did. In 2009, when I joined Meridian, I did not come in as an employee. I came in as an independent systems architect, a contractor, under my own consulting firm, Donovan Data Systems, LLC. My original contract had been drafted during the chaos of the 2008 financial crisis, when the firm's legal team was overwhelmed and understaffed. It contained a clause. Clause 9B in plain language, it said, "Any proprietary compliance framework, infrastructure, or reporting system designed and built by Donovan Data Systems during the advisory period remains the intellectual property of Donovan Data Systems, unless formally purchased under a separate licensing agreement." I had converted to employee status in 2011, but nobody had ever formally purchased the system. Nobody had ever signed a licensing transfer. Nobody had ever read Clause 9B, because nobody thought they needed to. Because nobody imagined the quiet woman in the compliance department would ever have a reason to use it. I had flagged it to legal twice over the years. Both times they said they would look into it. Both times nothing happened. I stopped flagging it and started waiting. That evening, after my meeting with the CFO, I called my attorney. Her name was Sandra Kim. Sharp, efficient, completely unimpressed by corporate titles. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for 4 seconds, then said, "Claire, is the original contract still active?" I said, Never formally terminated. I have every version, every extension, every amendment, all digitally signed and time-stamped. She said, and the system they are currently running? Is it built on your original framework? I said, every single layer of it. Brandon's new dashboard sits on top of my architecture like a fresh coat of paint on a building I designed from the foundation up. Sandra said, then they do not own what they think they own. And then she said 4 words that I will never forget. Claire, we have them. The following Monday, I walked into the office for the last time. I dressed carefully that morning, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because when you walk into the final scene of a 17-year story, you dress for the ending you deserve. I submitted my resignation at 9 a.m. sharp, printed on Donovan Data Systems letterhead. The last paragraph read, please note that per clause 9b of the original advisory contract dated March 2007 and its subsequent extensions, all proprietary systems currently operating within Meridian Financial Group's compliance infrastructure remain the intellectual property of Donovan Data Systems LLC. Formal licensing arrangements should be directed to Sandra Kim of Kim Legal Partners. I left it on the CFO's desk, badge on top, walked to the elevator, pressed lobby, and never looked back. By 11 a.m., the CFO's assistant had called me 3 times. By noon, Sandra had received a message from Meridian's legal team. By 2 p.m., the message had changed from aggressive to panicked. Because that morning, at exactly 10:47 a.m., Brandon Walsh had presented his Meridian 3.0 dashboard to the board of directors. And at exactly 10:49 a.m., every data feed on that dashboard had returned a single message. License verification required. Contact Donovan Data Systems. Every graph, every compliance report, every risk metric, every investor-facing number, gone, not broken, not crashed, just locked. Because the license key that authenticated the entire underlying system was mine, and I had not renewed it. Sandra called me at 3 p.m. that afternoon. She was trying very hard not to laugh. She said, Claire, their legal team just sent over an emergency licensing proposal. They are offering $2.1 million for permanent transfer of all system rights. I was sitting in my garden drinking tea. I said, what does the compliance framework actually cost to replace from scratch? She said, their own IT team estimated 8 to 10 million and 18 to 24 months minimum. And that is if they can find someone who understands what you built. I took a sip of tea, said, tell them the licensing fee is $3.8 million. Non-negotiable. And I wanted in writing that Brandon Walsh's name appears nowhere on the system documentation. Sandra laughed then. Actually laughed. Said, done. They signed within 48 hours. Brandon Walsh was quietly moved to a newly created role. Director of Strategic Initiatives. No system access, no team, no platform. Just a title and a calendar full of meetings that went nowhere. Meridian's board commissioned a full internal review of all contractor agreements going back 15 years. Turns out, I was not the only one who had slipped protective clauses into the small print during the chaos years. I was just the first one who had a reason to use them. 3 months later, I received a call from a private equity firm that had been watching the Meridian situation carefully. They wanted to talk about building a compliance infrastructure for their portfolio of 12 companies. I told them my rate. They did not negotiate. Donovan Data Systems is no longer dormant. Claire told me one thing before I shared her story. She said, I was never angry at Brandon. He was just a symptom. The real problem was a system that confuses confidence with competence and tenure with weakness. I did not fight that system. I simply reminded it of something it had forgotten, that the people who build things quietly in the background are not background characters. We are the story. If you have ever been called outdated, overlooked, or made to feel like your experience was a problem instead of an asset, this story was for you. Your silence is not weakness. Your patience is not passivity. And your knowledge, nobody can delete that. Not even with administrator access. Subscribe to Narrative Vault. Turn on every notification. New story drops in 3 days. And I promise you, it hits just as hard as this one. This is Narrative Vault, where every story has a price. See you next time.